Hello everybody, this is Kiri's show here. Now, this is gonna be a bit... Today is gonna be a bit harder for me to upload. The Wi-Fi in our house has been acting up, and took me about, I want to say an hour yesterday to upload a video. Basically, part 8 from last night. I started uploading that around 11:30, and it went to YouTube at about around 12. I believe 12:03 to be exact. Now, after that, there probably will not be a second video. At least not until around 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Now then, in saying that, let us begin. We cut to Izuku Midoriya, laying in a hospital bed. This boy has been through some trauma and been through some hell. Now, he wakes up. He is confused and he doesn't know where he is, as he immediately begins to try and stand up and actually move his body. He is being told by a lot of nurses and a lot of doctors that he needs to lay back down, as Deku is refusing. Deku is saying that he has to go get Eri and he needs to actually protect her. Overhaul is after her, which is when Bakugo and Uraraka would walk in. And seeing Deku like this isn't really... This is actually... What the hell? Why'd that pop up twice? This isn't actually good for them. Now, as soon as this... That's the third time. As soon as this happens... Okay, if that pops up again, I'm going to be annoyed. Now, as soon as that happens, Deku... Or not Deku. Uraraka and Bakugo are watching this, and this is whenever these two would walk over. They would tell Deku that he doesn't need to worry, Eri is safe. In fact, he needs to relax and do what the doctor said. As Uraraka would actually see Deku, she actually grabbed his hands, saying that it's okay, and she's actually trying to calm him down. Now, in saying this is whenever Deku, he would actually start calming down a bit. But it's not really... Well... You can still see the stiffness in his movements, and he actually asks how long it's been out. A day or so, or what is it, a couple of hours? They would just say a week. Which Deku actually immediately just has a sour look on his face. As they would explain that it's okay, and Eri is actually in the safe hands of quite a few bit of heroes. They've got all 10 of the top-ranking heroes looking after her. You have All Might, Aizawa. You have Endeavor actually keeping his distance, because he's not good with kids, clearly. And you even have Best Jeanist. Now, a lot of these lower unknown heroes are actually with Eri. Essentially, they're still quite powerful, they just lie low. Now, in saying that, this is whenever Deku, he would actually stand up. As soon as he does so, he's having trouble, as he would immediately fall to his knees, and he's actually coughing, and he's actually asking if he can get a cup of water or something. Which is whenever a doctor would say that he really should stay in bed. After being out for a week, his muscles in his body have begun starting to go with the symptoms of atrophy. Which is basically whenever... Muscle atrophy is basically whenever your muscles, because you stopped using them, they begin to get smaller and shrink. Basically making it to where you're basically... It's like the opposite of bodybuilding. You're losing muscle mass. Now, Deku's body has actually lost quite a bit, which is whenever he would immediately just start rewinding himself. He does so, and he's actually gotten his muscle back, as he stands to his feet and actually takes the cup from Uraraka. and drinks it. Now then, he would actually get dressed and walk out of the hospital room with these two. Well, walk out of the hospital, but after doing this, they would actually go back to Deku's store, and he's asking what happened. As they would explain everything, and Deku's quite surprised. Now, as soon as he gets back home, this is whenever Deku would actually see Eri, and she'd actually run up and hug him. Which is whenever Deku would actually smile. Now, after this, Deku's parents would walk in and actually see him, giving him a giant hug, and Deku would see Aizawa, along with another hero, actually sitting down watching cartoons with Eri. Now, after that, you would see as Deku begins getting some food from the kitchen. As he would actually start making a dish, people are essentially there, and Uraraka is actually helping Deku. As Baku was actually going to head home, or at least head to a gym and start training. Now, Uraraka and Deku are actually cooking, and people basically give them their space. Because Deku's parents already kind of know, because Deku talks about it sometimes, but he still does that. They would create a dish, and they'd actually go to sit down, and they would start eating it. Deku even made a plate for Eri, and she would actually enjoy it with them. Which is whenever someone would snap a picture, and Deku's mom would say it's just like they're a family. Which would actually kind of make Deku laugh nervously, but Uraraka's blushing pretty hard. Now, this is whenever Uraraka would actually say, after eating, that they need to talk outside. Deku would say yeah, as they go outside and talk. As this happens, Deku and Uraraka would begin talking outside, and Uraraka would confess her feelings to Deku. Deku's kind of surprised, but he would just say, so it's not only me, as these two would begin kissing. Which basically means they are now a couple. H2O. Anyway, Bakugo would have been close by, or at least back in his own apartment building. Or, no, he would probably be in his own apartment working out, and he would have overheard the conversation, actually saying this and smiling. He finally got these two together. Now, in that happening, Deku, he would actually begin training and talking with a lot of the pro heroes. They were saying that essentially back at the forest, since Deku essentially went after the Action Vanguard squad, they got lucky and were able to have a couple of students tag a Nomu with a tracker. This tracker essentially led them to a villain base, and All Might insisted that they waited for Deku to wake up, which kind of made no sense. This is whenever... Oh, jeez. This is whenever All Might would call on the phone and say that essentially Midoriya needs to come to UA and talk to him. Now, All Might would actually jump off to UA, which takes less than 5 seconds. Because All Might at 70% was calculated to be at Mach 29, which is insanely fast. Now, in saying that All Might would actually jump off and go to UA. Deku would do the same, actually leaving Uraraka. As he would say that All Might needs to talk to him and he needs to go. She would understand and actually see as Deku leaps off himself. She just smiles, thinking that there goes the next number one hero, and she would walk back inside. Now, after this, Deku would talk with All Might after going to UA. These two would have a conversation, and Deku would get the explanation of who All For One is, and exactly who Nana Shimura is. As Deku would remember that he kinda got caught up in the whole thing about Eri to ask who Nana Shimura was. All Might would have said that she is a hero who actually died in the line of duty. If not, she is the greatest hero he's ever seen, even better than himself. She's the reason that I learned to smile. She is what inspired me. Now, after this, Deku would start talking with All Might, and All Might would say that they're going to be conducting a raid against the villains. But not just that, essentially Deku is immune to Overhaul's effects, and they believe that Overhaul might actually be there. So they want him to actually fight Overhaul, which is essentially when All Might would say it's not the best idea, but it's the best thing that they've got. Because no matter what Overhaul does, he always seems to be a step ahead of them. It's like he plans things out from the get-go. It's like playing a game against someone who already knows the next 5 moves you're willing to take. So we gotta do one they don't expect. Overhaul saw how irrational and emotional you were. So I'm trusting you to keep your cool. Now, let us cut to later in that day during the villain's raid. If not, during the raid. Deku is actually walking into the villain's base, and whenever he does so, he busts through the wall. He busts through, and someone commented on what Deku's catchphrase would be. I don't condone it, because it might give me copyright just for saying it. But let me just say, Will Smith meme of 2018. Y'all probably know what that is. Now, you'd probably say something canny, but I can't really come up with it. I did not get a lot of sleep. Now then. He would bust through the wall, and he would actually begin fighting a lot of the villains. As soon as he broke through the wall and actually did this, a lot of the heroes would have moved in, as Deku would have immediately taken down Shigaraki and Korogiri. They would all immediately be teleported afterwards, and Deku would actually have to run with All Might to the other side of the city. And as soon as All Might gets there, All for One would have immediately just said to All Might that that's weird, or that that's unusual. He essentially is back in his prime, or he is actually just stronger. So, he believes that he has to fix the problem, as Overhaul would present himself also, along with one very special project All for One has been working on. All for One would introduce him to a little thing he calls mercy. Now, what is mercy? Back during the USJ, when Deku rewinded everything around him, he accidentally brought something to life. Now, what was this thing? Deku would watch as from the shadows emerges a giant T-Rex. And All for One would say that he essentially did something genetics did not think were possible. He turned a Nomu, or he turned a T-Rex into a Nomu, which Deku was kind of horrified by. But it's got its own little thing. Now, this T-Rex actually has a bone quirk to give it hardened skin, and it actually has a lot of different things. It even has that one style. It has that same type of duplication quirk that Twice has, because that copy thing all for one can do, and it even has a version of Muscular's quirk. Now, Deku's thinking that if this thing's essentially a Nomu, then that's going to be a very big problem. As Deku begins fighting with the T-Rex, and All Might begins fighting with All for One. Now, he's not only doing that, but so is Overhaul joining in the battle. Now, Deku's fighting against this T-Rex, and he's figuring out that this thing is essentially what he brought to life, so he should be able to undo that. As he tries to rewind it, essentially killing it. But that is the flaw in his quirk. Something died and he rewinded it, so he cannot rewind it back to its original state. Not only that, but it's been too modified that he can't even figure out exactly what type of DNA sequence is right or correct in this thing. Overhaul must have put it together a certain way after All for One did this. Now, Deku, he would immediately just power up to 100%, and he's actually using Rewind a little bit. Because at this point, Rewind and 100% are basically something that Deku can do, but he can go at 95% max, so he needs that little extra boost. Now, as soon as Deku does this, he begins fighting and knocking around the T-Rex. He would knock it through a couple buildings, and people would immediately see this giant monster. Deku's telling them that they need to get out of here and just to tell everyone around them to evacuate. As this is going on, Overhaul's trying to actually fight All Might, and All Might knows what Overhaul's quirk is, because Eri explained as soon as all 5 fingers touches you, you basically explode, which All Might would have taken quite literally. Now, while Deku is fighting the T-Rex, he would have been able to actually do something he didn't think possible. After getting knocked around and flung around quite a bit, and having to basically stop himself from being eaten, he would have found that he can actually forward the T-Rex. Basically, he would, as soon as Deku's caught in its teeth or in its mouth, he would have been able to actually turn the T-Rex back into a fossil by actually fast-forwarding its gene, essentially aging it. Now, after doing this, Deku would have actually seen as the T-Rex ages out of existence, but it still keeps its bone manipulation, if not the way it looked, from the bones protruding out of its head. So Deku just thinks that essentially the quirks stayed inside this thing, and if he were to rewind it, it can come back to life. Now then, Deku goes over to the fight with All for One and Overhaul. As Deku immediately powers up, he takes a running stance and immediately charges in. As soon as he does this, he actually just comes in and actually drop kicks Overhaul through a building, which Overhaul is now pissed off by. Deku comments that if he's mad by that, then he's really gonna fucking hate what he does next. Now, as he says this, Deku begins manipulating time around Overhaul. He immediately puts his hands up, and as he does so, he's now trying to focus on this new ability he has with fast-forwarding things. He would turn the entire building into a fine powder and actually confine it around Overhaul, actually rehydrating it, turning it into dried cement, which Overhaul is now trying to actually... He's trying to get out of it, and Deku's thinking that Overhaul's done. As soon as he thinks this, Overhaul would have actually charged toward Deku, and as soon as he's able to tap Deku, he would immediately merge their bodies together, basically horrifying Deku, as they are now stuck together and Overhaul is able to use Deku's quirk. All Might is in shock and confused. As he sees these two, Deku begins trying something. He's only able to think about his quirk, so he immediately begins rewinding. As soon as he does this, he would rewind to a point where he turned Overhaul into a child again. He's concentrating and concentrating and concentrating, and he actually turns on full cowling to boost his quirk. As he does this, he essentially turns Overhaul into nothing, rewinding him out of existence, and actually getting control over his body again. Now, after this, Deku's looking around and he can't see Overhaul. As All Might saw this, he realizes that that was Midoriya's only move, and in fact, that if he can do that to that villain, then he might be able to get rid of All For One. But now he's thinking that he shouldn't have to do that in the first place. So, he'll have to tell Deku that he needs to bring that villain back or figure out how to do so. Which is not going to be possible. Now, Deku and All Might immediately begin fighting with All For One. Now, since All Might's back in his prime, and these two basically almost killed each other already, the fact that All Might has a successor, they would be able to take down All For One, actually getting him into Tartarus prison. Now, the way they would take him down is whenever All For One tries using his All Might killing weapon, Deku, he would be able to actually hold All For One back and actually push himself to 1,000,000% for a long enough time to throw a 1,000,000% smash, which would actually destroy All For One's arm. Actually send it flying. Which is whenever All Might would have taken this opportunity to actually, well, not break everything in All For One's body, but he would have disabled All For One from being able to even try and use his quirks. So I wouldn't say he would sever everything, but he would tell Deku to try essentially keeping him in 1 second at a time at the complete max. Now basically what this means is Deku's creating a stasis field around All For One, manipulating time around him to be at the exact second he lost his arm, essentially bringing All For One into a never-ending hell of the exact pain or the highest point of his pain. And I want to say he'd either pass out or he would just be sitting there confused trying to move, but he finds each time he starts moving he just goes back to his sitting position. Basically a purgatory move. Now, the authorities would arrive and arrest Overhaul, along with a lot of scientists wanting to actually test Deku's quirk more and actually see what he can do with fossils. Because if he's able to do this, he can basically bring back any extinct species, which kind of intrigues them. So, I am going to be leaving this part off of here, guys. Before I go, I just realized the Big 3 fight and the Provisional License exam, I literally just almost forgot those. The Big 3 fight would happen where Mirio wants to fight Deku, and he's saying that Deku doesn't need to hold back because he can take anything Deku throws at him. Deku would just be unsure as he begins fighting with them. One thing he does is he begins by immediately just going into full cowling and jumping up into the air, as he would have heard about their quirks. As soon as he does so, everyone will get dismantled by Mirio and Nejire and Tamaki, I believe his name is, the food guy, Sun Eater. They were told to all go up against Deku. So they are doing so, thinking that this first year might show good progress as a hero, but against the Big 3, he's nothing. Or he's not going to last very long. Deku would have been able to rewind Mirio to the point where he can actually hit him. And by doing this, he would immediately just start rewinding Mirio as he would have thrown a punch. Or he would have just been able to throw a punch with rewind on. And what I mean by that is, essentially, he can rewind Mirio to before he activates his quirk. So I want to say that essentially cancels it out. cancels it out, actually letting Deku give the advantage over these three. And whenever it comes to Deku fighting Nejire, I believe. I'm going to need to find out her first name. That was hard on my throat to try and say, Nejire. Alright. I believe her quirk is basically just spirals, so she would just try throwing those at Deku, and Deku would be able to dodge them, because since these are essentially spinning, they take longer to actually charge up, but they are more powerful than just shooting straight. So Deku would actually have a speed advantage over her, being able to actually jump onto her and actually punch her into the ground. As Deku goes up against Tamaki. Tamaki would have immediately tried using his quirk and creating the tentacles, along with actually creating armor and putting this to good use. He would have actually tried using Chimera Kraken against Deku, which Deku is way too fast for, and he just puts his arms up, charging through it. Anytime it does hit, Deku just immediately goes through it, able to actually overpower him, which is whenever he would just take him down. Now then, after this happens, the provisional license would happen, or the exam would happen where they're supposed to get their Pro Hero license. Deku would have gotten his, and the best way they would do so is whenever they would arrive, people would have seen Deku, and they would have actually been hesitant to shake his hand, so he wouldn't have that target on his back that everyone else does. Remember that one guy grabbed them or shakes their hands. Now then, afterwards, Deku and Uraraka have actually been sticking together along with Bakugo. But Bakugo would have wandered off, somewhat because he feels like a third wheel. As he would meet up with Jiro and, I believe, everyone else in Class 1A going up against that super smart girl. Now, her entire strategy did not predict that Bakugo would be there. But after that, Deku and Uraraka would arrive, actually helping them all out. And she kind of didn't predict for a guy that can manipulate time, along with the fact that he's super fast and strong. So her entire plan would just fall apart. Now, this series has been very fun to make. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, the T-Rex thing, I kind of had planned out from part 1. Or from whenever I started the USJ attack. I thought, wait, isn't there some dinosaur fossils in Japan? And I googled it. There are some, I believe. It's never stated what parts they're in, but dinosaurs are found all over the world. Actually, hang on, let me Google it again, do a bit more research. Okay, there are dinosaur fossils in Japan, and I believe there were herbivores, so I believe I can say there were probably predators like T-Rexes. Now then, I am going to be leaving this part off of here, guys, and remember that this series will be coming back after Season 4, so people who do ask for more, please just remember that these aren't essentially, well, what's the best way to say it? I can't essentially put these out without knowing the main story, because I used what I know from Season 4 so far to make the overhaul attack happen early. So I'm going to be waiting for the rest of it to come out in dub so that I can watch it properly and get a better understanding for the next part of the series. So you guys are probably just going to have to wait a little while before I can bring some of these what-ifs back. But I do feel like this did give it some justice for this part. Now, goodbye guys, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and have an amazing day.